Yes, hello. Again, and welcome to today's webinar. We're happy to have you with us today, and we're glad you could join. As Paul said, I'm Tony Gallo. I'm a Housing and Community Development Director at ICF, a contractor that does quite a bit of work with HUD. At this time, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, all of whom are with the Office of Recapitalization at HUD headquarters. First off, I'd like to introduce Tom Davis, who is the office director. We're happy to have him here today. John Ardavini, a branch chief in the office, and Merlene Labissiere, who is a housing transaction manager with the office, and we are very fortunate to have them all here today with us. At this time, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Tom Davis.
Great, thanks very much, Tony, and thanks all of you for today. I think calling me a presenter is overstating my role in that really I'm just launching the event and with some welcoming comments, but John Ardavini and Merlene Labissiere have a lot of really great expertise and knowledge to share. As you all know, the rental assistance demonstration offers some opportunities converting a Mod Rehab contract, both an SRO contract and a regular Mod Rehab contract, to the second form, which has a lot of advantages that you'll hear about in the course of this session. But what we're really excited about is that we have been able to do a variety of modifications to the process to create a very streamlined process for small properties. And we recognize that for a small property, you don't have a lot of money or bandwidth or time to do an involved transaction. And we've really tried to trim down what's involved in a Mod Rehab conversion. So this webinar is to introduce you to that streamlined path. And in addition to John and Merlene, who are doing the presentation, the team of folks doing Mod Rehab work are ready to walk you through the process and go through all the details in a very one-on-one way with anybody who would like that support as you are thinking about your Mod Rehab conversion and your potential future vehicle for receiving subsidy at your property. So really thrilled that all of you are on the line, and I will get out of the way and turn over to John and Merlene to get into the substance. So John, do you want to take it away?
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Folks, really do appreciate you joining us today. My name is John Ardavini, and I work in the Office of Recapitalization. Today, Merlene and I are going to walk you through the Mod Rehab streamline conversion process, and our hope and our goal is to ensure that at the end of this presentation, you all take something away and understand that Mod Rehab and Mod Rehab SRO properties are eligible for a streamlined process. We have one. It's quicker and it's easier. And there's some steps in the streamlined processing for the RAD conversion, right? So today, the hope is to walk through this presentation and hopefully you take something away that, oh, you know, this RAD process can be a little bit easier. So saying that, I'm now going to turn it quickly over to Merlene. She's going to walk through a few polling questions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Merlene Labissiere. I'm one of the transaction managers in the Office of Recap. And for the next few minutes, I will be asking a few polling questions. And the first one is, how would you rate your level of knowledge of the RAD program? Are you a beginner, meaning that this is maybe the first time you're hearing about it, doing a training? Intermediate, you've skimmed through the notice, maybe perhaps attended a training, but still haven't jumped in and submitted an application. Expert, you know, the notice back and forth, You've done some trainings, but you're here to just get a refresher. So if you could please select one of the three, that'll be great. And while you do that, I will silence my cell phone. So again, are you a beginner, A, B, intermediate, or C, an expert?
The poll results should be up now.
Okay, I see them. It seems like we have about 20 folks that are beginners, a few experts, quite a few, 33 folks still haven't responded, and about 11 intermediate. Okay, well, the next question is, are you an owner or representing one of the following? Are you an owner, A PHA, B, part of the HUD staff, D, consultant, E, other. I guess other might be maybe not a PHA, but an entity that is administering a Mod Rehab contract. So if you're one of the following, please select A, B, C, D, or E to represent which group you fall in.
The poll will be closing soon. Make sure that when you select your polling answer that you click the submit button after you've selected your answer, so that way your submission will be recorded.
Thanks. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the results are in there.
Oh, okay. So it looks like we have a decent amount of folks who are owners, with 16 having answered the polling question, 14 of the PHAs, 15 are HUD staff, a few are consultants, and quite a few have not answered, 12, and 6 are other. The next question is, are you associated with a Mod Rehab or Mod Rehab SRO contract? Select all that apply. So do you currently have a Mod Rehab contract for the property or a single room occupancy Mod Rehab contract on the property? And I guess this would be geared more towards the owners.
And the poll will be closing soon. Make sure you click that submit button once again, so that way your results will be recorded.
Thank you. Again, select all that apply. Looks like we have the results, and most folks here today are associated with the Mod Rehab, and that's 25, and out of about 22 out of 69, about 22 are associated with the Mod Rehab SRO, and 34 folks did not respond. Okay, well now I will pass it back to John Artavini.
Thanks, Marlene, and thanks everybody for participating in those polls. Gets us to know a little bit about our participants, who you are, and you know, if you're a beginner or intermediate, you're definitely in the right place, or even an expert. You know, this is a new process we want to introduce to everybody, and so you know, just happy to have you here today and either administer a Mod Rehab contract, SRO contract, own one, or looking to assist an owner with converting one to RAD. You're in the right place today. So thanks for joining again. So what's the challenge facing the Mod Rehab? You know, we call them Section 8 Moderate Rehabilitation, what we know as Mod Rehab, or our McKinney-Vento Section 8 Single-Room Occupancy, which we call our Mod Rehab SRO as well. These programs support about 33,000 or so units, and of which about half of those, believe it or not, are 20 units or fewer. So there's a whole lot of owners out there on annual renewals, right? These contracts are renewed on a year-to-year basis. And the challenge is it's hard to sustain and think about long-term preservation in a year-by-year contract. And as you can tell, there's hundreds, of these properties with 20 units or less. And so, thinking through how we can, make the RAD conversion a little bit easier for folks is, well, when we issued the RAD notice. And that was done in September 5th of 2019. I thought, we should put some information in there about how we can make this easier. And you can find a couple sections in there about the policy of 20 units or less. One is in the capital needs assessment section, which is in section 2.4 of the RAD notice. And then you also have attachment 2A, which is the conversion plan requirements. And there's a bit of policy in there that talks about, how does the right to streamline these types of conversions and may exempt owners from submitting a capital needs assessment for 20 units or under. And so that was the thought when we issued the notice, just another way, an easier way for owners to access RAD and be successful. How does RAD help? Well, if you haven't heard of RAD, it really is going to allow you all to convert to long-term Section 8 assistance, right? Again, now you're either you're on a one-year contract that's renewed annually. And what does RAD do? It'll convert that Mod Rehab or Mod Rehab SRO assistance to a 20-year project-based rental assistance contract or 20-year project-based voucher contract, and to allow an ability to leverage public or private investment to address capital needs. It's typically very hard to find lenders or investors willing to put money into a property on a year-by-year contract. But when you have a 20-year contract, that's attractive to the lender-investor community. And then being able to attract lenders and investors in addressing capital needs, what's that going to do? Well, it's going to preserve your long-term affordability. And the great thing about RAD is, part of the initial rent setting, what we've seen historically as part of the Mod Rehab program is the property is most likely going to see a higher rent set at RAD, at the RAD initial rent setting for the first, for the 20-year HAP contract. That's going to stabilize the property moving forward, making it financially viable for the long term. So what are some eligibility factors for streamlined processing? Well, you have to have an active Mod Rehab or active SRO contract. You have to have 20 units or fewer, right? The contract, the owner, has to be in good standing with the Public Housing Authority. Usually what we see is on a PHA, Public Housing Authority letterhead. We see that the owner is in compliance with the Mod Rehab program and is in good standing with the Mod Rehab program. Something else we're going to need to see is verifying physical condition, and that's done through showing a passing housing quality standard, what we know as HQS inspections, or UPICS, Uniform Physical Condition Standards inspections. You need to have passing inspections on every unit. And lastly, the owner can't currently be considering redevelopment or recapitalization. If they are, they wouldn't be eligible for the streamlined process. So what are some advantages for streamlined processing? Well, in many cases, there are fewer requirements. And what's the biggest one? No capital needs assessment is required. And we say in most cases, because we may require one if you're not in good standing, and then you wouldn't be eligible for a streamlined conversion. But if you are eligible for a streamlined conversion, there's no need for a capital needs assessment. And that is usually the crux of any RAD conversion plan. One of the heaviest lifts. It's very expensive, or can be expensive, and it takes a lot of back and forth, as we call it, to scrub it to compliance. And oftentimes, you're also not going to be required to submit a full environmental review. You'll be subject to something called a tiered environmental review. It's a lesser review. And whether it's done by HUD staff, if you're opting for project-based rental assistance, or by a responsible entity, which is a unit of local government for the project-based voucher assistance, they'll walk you through those requirements that you'll need to meet. There are also going to be minimal items to complete on your accessibility and relocation plan checklist, right? We're not considering relocation because we're not going to be doing any rehab. We shouldn't be seeing any financing commitments. There's no sources and uses statement or scope of work. Again, as you can see, these are usually the heaviest, most complex pieces of a RAD conversion. So what are some key contract differences? Well, there's two paths that you can take. for a RAD conversion. One is a project-based voucher, and that contract is currently administered by a public housing authority known as a PHA. The units eligible for that type of conversion are any occupied unit within the past 24 months. There's no rescreening of tenant income, occupancy, crime during conversion, whether you're with project-based vouchers or project-based rental assistance. And the length of contract is 20 years for both PBV and PBRA. The physical inspections after conversion for project-based vouchers are subject to housing quality standards inspections. For the Mod Rehab and Mod Rehab SRO community, converting to PBV is very similar to how you operate as currently as a Mod Rehab or Mod Rehab SRO owner. PHA continues to administer your contract. You continue to have that relationship with the PHA. They continue to do a lot of the administrative work for the project-based voucher contract, just like they do with your Mod Rehab and Mod Rehab SRO contracts. We do see a lot of smaller owners opt for project-based vouchers. However, we do see owners also opt for project-based rental assistance for 20 units and under. And this is going to be a contract that's going to be administered by HUD Multifamily. Signed by both the owner and HUD. And all contracted units on the Mod Rehab or Mod Rehab SRO contract carry over to the RAD PBRA contract, regardless of occupancy, if they're vacant or not. And as I've already said, there's no rescreening. The contract is subject to a 20-year term. And moving forward after conversion, you're going to be subject to what we call a real estate assessment center, a REAC inspection for the physical standard, usually done on a yearly basis. I'm now going to turn over the presentation to Marlene to take over from here.
Thank you, John. Again, my name is Marlene Lavisiere. I'm one of the transaction managers in the Office of Recap that if you decide to do a conversion, we'll review your conversion application. So right now, I'm going to start with an overview of the HUD Streamlined Conversion process. And as you see on your screen, there are about 6 steps that will bring you to the conversion approval. The first 3 steps are related to contacting and informing the stakeholders or the affected parties of your plans to convert your Mod Rehab or Mod Rehab SRO contract to either a PBV or a PBRA contract. So step 1 is you'll consult with the PHA that is currently administering your Mod Rehab contract and submit a submission of interest to HUD. Step 2, you'll inform the residents at the property of your intent to convert. And step 3, I think I'm losing connection. You will consult with the Continuum of Care agency if you are Mod Rehab SRO project. So again, the first 3 steps involve contacting the stakeholders and affected parties. And then once you do that, you can advance to step 4, which is selection of a public housing authority if you're doing a PBV conversion. And the entity that is currently administering your contract is not or does not have a jurisdiction to continue administration of your PBV contract. So once you have informed and contacted all the stakeholders and affected parties, you are ready to advance to step 5, which is pulling together your conversion plan and submitting it to the RAD resource desk. Of course, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail further on in the presentation. This is just a high-level overview of the streamlined process. So when you have completed and pulled together all your documentation to complete the conversion plan, and we reviewed it to make sure that it meets the requirements of the notice, you will get a conversion approval in step 6. And that is a letter that will detail the terms and conditions of your approval. Once you get this approval, you will have approximately 90 days to complete the administrative functions that go along with setting your contract, either PBV or PBRA contract, setting those 2 contracts up. And that may include, if you're doing a PBV route, having the units meet H2S standards, working with the PHA to get these units inspected. If you're doing the PBRA route, you're going to be working with your assigned account executive to get your vouchers set up, and to do your 2530 approval. So if you run into the situation where you're running out of time and you may need an extension, you can just contact the Office of RECAP via your transaction manager and request a an extension beyond the 90-day closing period that's listed in your HUD approval letter. So again, that conversion was just a high-level overview of the conversion process. And right now I'm going to go a little bit more into the details of what is needed to complete your conversion application. Indicating interest. How will the Office of RECAP know that you're interested in converting your Mod Rehab contract or Rehab SRO contract to either a project-based voucher contract, PBV, or a project-based rental assistance contract? Well, the first step is that you will create an account on the RAD resource desk at radresource.net. Once you have created this account at radresource.net, you will submit an expression of interest, and this expression of interest will let the Office of RECAP know that you want to convert your current contract to PBV or PBRA contract. In the submission of interest, you'll tell us a little bit about the property, about the project, and provide a copy of the Mod Rehab contract and so forth. I'll get a little bit more into that later on in the presentation. So once the Office of RECAP gets an expression of interest from you, and a transaction manager will be assigned to you. And this transaction manager is going to reach out to you and schedule what we call a concept call. This concept call is to discuss the process of converting your current Mod Rehab contract to either a PBV or a PBRA contract. And it usually takes about 30 to 45 minutes. So when you have submitted your expression of interest, you've had your concept call, you now know what is needed to start working on your conversion application. One of the very first steps that you'll need to do, again, is to engage resident engagement. And this resident engagement includes setting or sending out notices to the tenants at the property and informing them of at least 2 resident briefings. These 2 resident briefings will include information about contract expiration, the units to be covered under a PBV or PBRA contract. In that notice, you'll say if you're going to pursue a PBV or PBRA contract. Describe any changes that the conversion may involve, like change in ownership, changes to the units, etc. And then also you will explain that the tenants will be allowed or given a 30-day comment period in which they can submit questions and concerns that they may have. And you will provide them with the instructions on how to submit these comments and questions that they may have. In addition to informing the tenants of your intent to convert your Mod Rehab contract, you also want to provide residents with the 1-year notification that you will be terminating the Mod Rehab contract at the property. And this notification should be posted throughout the property at 3 prominent locations, informing the residents that upon conversion of this new PBV or PBRA contract, that the current Mod Rehab contract will be terminated. So attachment 2A is a very useful document, attachment 2A of the notice. Today I'm going to do a very high-level, broad overview of the process of converting your Mod Rehab contract to either a PBV or PBRA contract. I will discuss briefly the documentation needed to do the streamlined conversion. However, attachment 2A will provide a lot more detail for the documents that I'm about to jump into with the next slide. So please refer to attachment 2A if you don't remember all of what I said here today, or to get a little bit more information. So the conversion overview. The conversion overview is a formal request for streamline conversion. And again, to be eligible for the streamline conversion, the property has to have 20 or less units. And in your conversion overview, you are going to provide a summary of the property's owner's conversion goals. So what are your goals in pursuing a conversion of your Mod Rehab or Mod Rehab SRO contract? You want to, make sure that you're able to continue providing affordable housing for the next 20 years. Also, in your conversion overview, you're going to provide property history. We're going to discuss the physical description of the property. And on the RAD resource desk, you're going to have the option to select either you're interested in doing a PBV, project-based voucher, or a PBRA, project-based rental assistance contract. In addition, you're going to include the identification of other properties, and we would love to know how this conversion of assistance will impact the residents at your project or property. So again, to be eligible to convert, to do the streamline conversion, you have to show that the property is in good physical condition. And how do you do that? You will upload to the RAD resource desk verification or confirmation that the inspection reports show that the property is in good physical condition. So you're going to submit the property's most recent housing quality standards or real estate assessment REACT scores up to the RAD conversion desk. And for PBV conversions, prior to executing your PBV contract, if you choose to go that route, the PHA is going to ensure that the units meet HQS, housing quality standards, before executing the new HAP contract. And any deficiencies that are found by the PHA will need to be addressed prior to execution of the HAP contract. So again, in order to be eligible for the streamline conversion, you must currently have a Mod Rehab contract or a Mod Rehab SRO contract. And of course, we want to see evidence of this contract, and so you will need to upload a copy of your of the current Mod Rehab contract to the RAD resource desk, including all exhibits. The Statement of Compliance with Fair Housing and Civil Rights. Listed on your screen right now are 3 instances of where owners may not be able to participate in RAD if they have a charge of systemic violation of the Fair Housing Act, a lawsuit alleging patterns or practices of discrimination, or violations of state and local law prescribing discrimination in housing. So you will not be able to participate in RAD if you have any of the following. However, if you're able to resolve these issues, then you may move forward and provide us with certification that you are in compliance with fair housing and civil rights in order to be eligible to convert your Mod Rehab contract to either a PBV or PBRA contract. I wanted to pause to see if there were any questions. I know this is a lot of information.
Yes, Marlene, we do have 4 questions right now. The first is, when we discuss the size of our conversion related to streamlined processing, are we only referring to the number of units under the HAP contract or the total number of units in the building?
That is a very good question, and I've gotten that question quite a few times. We are referring to the number of units at the location. So, for example, you may have a property that has 60 units, but you only have 20 units on the contract. But that doesn't mean, unfortunately, because you only have 20 units on the contract, that you're eligible for the streamlined process. It's the total number of units at the project or at the property.
Great, thank you. Another one is there a checklist of the post-approval items that need to be completed prior to closing?
We have what we call a Mod Rehab Processing Guide that takes you step by step of all of the documentation that you need to upload to the RAD resource desk for you to complete a conversion plan. And for closing, we will provide, if you're doing a PBP conversion, we will provide you or a PBRA conversion. In your approval letter, there will be terms and conditions and the steps necessary to do post-approval or prior to closing will be included in that approval letter. Did I miss anything, team, as to this question? I just want to make sure that I answered it completely.
No, you hit it spot on, Marlene. One thing I want to just clarify on the total unit versus contract unit. In RAD, when we underwrite to the total units. The thing that's really terrific about the streamlined process is really what we're going to focus in on is, because there really isn't any underwriting except maybe an operating pro forma. Streamline eligibility is actually going to rely on the contract unit, 20 units or under. So if you have 42 units at the property, but only 10 are under the Mod Rehab contract, you're eligible for Streamline. We'd be maybe looking at, Marlene might get into this in just a few minutes, for the operating pro forma, we're going to underwrite your pro forma to the total units, right? Because we're curious about all the income. But the streamlined approach is the trigger, is the actual contract units.
Great. The next question has to do with the time frame for streamlined processing. So we had gone through the slides that talked about the first 60 days after submission, and then we talked about after approval, 90 days before closing unless an extension is needed. So one person asked, does that mean it takes over a year to convert?
It can take up to a year, or it can take up to over a year. It all depends on how complete of a conversion plan you submit initially to the RAD resource desk, how responsive you are to the transaction manager's questions and trying to resolve deficiencies in the application. And it just, I would say, depends a lot on how quickly you're able to provide the necessary documentation needed to advance to the next step of review. So there have been instances where it takes less than a year, but it could definitely possibly take over a year.
Yeah, really, I'll just add to that. That's exactly right. It's really, once we have that call with you guys, it's really up to you. Once you submit a conversion plan, the idea is streamlining this, and Marlene's going to get into the rest of this in a minute, of why hopefully this is a whole lot easier for everyone. Within 60 days, you should get an approval letter. There's no reason why you can't. It should be pretty straightforward to get there. And then the administrative back-end work should take, anywhere between about 60 to 90 days, administrative review, whether you're working with a public housing authority or HUD field staff to get onboarded into the program. So you could do this in 6 months, too, or less. It's really up to the speed you're moving at, because HUD staff will definitely get you to where you need to be as quick as possible.
We have a couple more questions if you'd like to take them now, or you can wait till later. I'll leave it up to HUD folks.
Let's advance, and then we'll take some more questions in a few minutes.
Sounds good.
Okay, the next document that you would upload to the RAD resource desk to complete your conversion plan is the choice mobility option. And this is if you're converting, doing a PBRA conversion. The owners must submit a fully executed choice mobility letter of agreement that's signed between both the property project owner and the PHA. The choice mobility option provides residents with the right to move with a voucher within the later of 24 months of contract execution or 24 months after their move-in date. However, there are instances where the PHA may not be able to provide this choice mobility option, and so the project owner can submit a request for a good cause exemption in their conversion plan. And HUD will review that request and approve it based on their reasoning if they should be granted a good cause exemption. So again, as you may have noticed, resident notification is very important in the conversion plan process. As part of the conversion plan, you will need to upload to the RAD resource desk confirmation of the dates resident meetings were held. Again, you're going to hold 2 resident meetings informing the residents of the project of your intent to convert either your Mod Rehab contract or your Mod Rehab SRO contract to PBV or PBRA. You're going to allow them 30 days, again, to comment. And so we're going to want to see documentation of the comments that were submitted by the residents and a description of how residents' comments will be addressed in conversion. Proof of written communication to residents informing them of the owner's intent, again, needs to be uploaded to the RAD resource desk. And then also the notices that were sent to the residents or posted at the property need to be uploaded to the RAD resource desk to confirm that you've met this requirement. And lastly, an attachment certifying that the required resident meetings were held. So you're going to certify that you did the 2 meetings, you provided them with the 30-day comment period, you responded to their comments, and all of this is going to be certified through certification that will be uploaded to the RAD resource desk. So again, we want to make sure that the residents are properly notified prior to conversion of the Mod Rehab contract to a PBV or PBRA. So this slide is going to touch on the initial contract rent setting. As you are already aware, there are differences between the PBRA and PBV. A PBRA contract rent setting, it will be the lesser of either the comparable market rents, which will be determined by a rent comparability study. You'll have to hire a vendor to do a rent comparability study, or 110% of fair market rent. And lastly, the last determinant, you may possibly be able to get up to 120% of FMR if you're able to show that the property is located or the project is located in the zip code where 30% or less, where the property is below 30% of low income housing, or 51% of the units, 51% of the tenants, 51% of the area is rent burden, or lastly, there is revitalization activity in the area. So, I'm just going to repeat that. For PBRA contract rent setting, you're going to have your rent set at the lesser of market rents as determined by a RCS, rent comparability study, 110% of fair market rent, or you may be able to go as high as 120% of fair market rent if one of the following is true. 30% or less is poverty-stricken, 51% or less of the households in the zip code are rent burden, or there are revitalization efforts in the area. For a PBV contract is slightly different, where the PHA will do, the rents will be determined at the lesser of or the lower of a rent reasonableness analysis conducted by the PHA, or 110% of fair market rent, or the rent that you have requested. So again, for PBV contract rent setting, it will be the lower of the PHA's rent reasonableness analysis, or 110% of fair market rent, or C, owner requested rent. So here we have an example where in Newark metro area, one bedroom FMR is $1,358. And at 110%, it's bumped up to $1,494. So if that was the lesser of in one of the scenarios above, that would be the rent for your project. And the adjustments for PBRA are done annually via OCAS, and for PBV contracts, they are redetermined annually to rent reasonableness, or 110% of FMR. So for additional details, see CFR 9983-302. So again, the capital needs assessment, you may be exempt from having to submit a capital needs assessment if you're able to provide evidence that the property is in fair condition. And how do you do that again? You submit or upload to the RAD resource desk the most recent inspection reports, HUS or REAC, showing that the units at the project meet the housing quality standards. And so you will be exempt from having to order a capital needs assessment. As we all know, it's very time consuming and can be very expensive. Again, another part of the streamlined process that is a heavy lift, but not as much of a heavy lift as we were doing the regular conversion process, is the environmental review. For the PBRA, if you choose to do a PBRA contract, you're going to do a tiered environmental review. And the tiered environmental review is only going to address maybe even less than half of what's addressed in a regular environmental review. And those rules will be the coastal barrier resources, flood insurance, floodplain management, contamination, and historic preservation. So if you're doing the PBRA conversion, you're going to have your vendor upload to HUD's HEROES application a tiered environmental review, and your assigned transaction manager will review the tiered review for these 5 factors. If you're going the PBV route, you're going to do a Part 58 review. And in this instance, the PHA is going to take a lead and have the responsible entity complete the Part 58 review. So the next document that you're going to need to upload to the RAD resource desk, which is going to be very quick and very simple since you're not doing any development or any rehab at the property and therefore will not need to relocate any tenants, is that you're going to provide the information requested in the first section. I don't know if you can see that, the PH name, PH code, and then below that, you're going to answer 2 questions. And those questions have to deal with relocation of tenants and if any rehab work will be done at the property. So you're going to pretty much say no, there's not going to be, or the project is not going to involve new construction, and no, again, that the conversion will not result in off-site temporary relocation. So once you check those 2 boxes, you're just going to go to the next page, sign off, and certify that your answers are true. And you'll be done with the accessibility plan and relocation list. So we want to know who will be running and managing this project. So the development team and ownership structure, we will need to have documentation identifying the legal entity that will own the project following conversion and the proposed management agent up to the RAD resource desk. So what do you upload? An organizational chart of owner entity, existing and new if applicable. If there's a change of ownership, you're going to provide evidence of successful experience owning, operating HUD or other multifamily properties. If there's for proposed changes in management, evidence of successful experience managing and offering HUD or other multifamily properties again. So again, with this slide, we just want to make sure that the property that is being converted is either going to continue being run by a development team, experienced development team, and or ownership structure. So we need for you to provide that documentation or upload that documentation to the RAD resource desk. And for PBRA conversions, you'll need to complete the previous participation certification for all principals. So Tony, I'm going to take a pause and see if there are any questions. I can't hear.
Hey, Tony, your phone might be on mute. Are you able to hear us?
Or I can continue.
Yeah, go ahead, Marlene. Why don't you go ahead and continue? We'll check back in for questions when Tony's back with us.
Okay, I will continue. So in addition to wanting to know the experience of the development team, make sure that the project is in capable hands, we also want to know that the project is in financially good standing. So we request that you upload operating performance. And this operating performance is going to be a snapshot for the next 20 years that matches the 20-year term of the proposed PBV or PBRA HAP contract. In the operating performer, you're going to also include the past 3 years of historical trends for all income and expenses. So again, we want to see that financially this property is going to be in good standing for the next 20 years. So we want to see the income and expenses for the next 20 years, and also the past 3 years of historical trends of all income and expenses. There are some benchmarks that need to be satisfied, such as operating expenses shall be no less than 85% of the average of the past 3 years. So you want to, one of those columns, demonstrate the average amounts and make it a little easier on us, so we won't have to calculate it ourselves. And if there is a major deviation, provide an explanation or documentation as to why these benchmarks are not being met. And also with the operating performance, you want to include the vacancy loss, which I believe is 2%. And then you also want to include for bad debt allowance in the operating performer, which is at, at 3%. And then also annual deposits for reserves for replacement account. You want to show that you have reserves on hand to meet any capital need expenses in the future in your operating performer. And we would like to see at least $450 per unit per month for the operating reserve account, per unit per year, sorry, for the operating reserve account in the operating. So again, please include in your operating performer the vacancy loss, percentage for vacancy loss, a percentage for bad debt allowance, and the annual deposit for reserves for replacement, which is $450 per unit per month. And again, as I mentioned earlier, in Section 2A of the notice, it will provide you with additional details as to the operating performer and what we're looking to receive in your conversion plan. So certification of compliance in site and neighborhood standards. The Office of RECAP wants to make sure that the site and neighborhood of the project meets the Fair Housing Act and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So if you're doing a PBV conversion, the PHA will submit certification that the project meets the requirements of the Fair Housing Act according to CFR 983.57. If you're doing a PBRA conversion, the owner will self-certify that the project meets compliance with site and neighborhood per the Appendix 3 of the RAD notice. So if you have a Mod Rehab SRO contract, there are special considerations to keep in mind. And some of the special considerations are here listed in front of you. One of the very first is that if you have a homeless preference, that will be required to continue after conversion. Your admin plan, if you are PBV, or tenant selection plan, if you are doing a PBRA conversion, will need to state the homeless preference after conversion. Also, at this time, Shelter Plus SROs are not eligible to conversion. It's only the McKinsey-Vento SROs that are eligible for conversion. And as we stated earlier in the presentation, one of the first 3 steps is that you will need to consult with the Continuum of Care agency to inform them of your intent to convert the Mod Rehab SRO contract to either PBV or PBRA, and you'll have to upload a letter from the Continuum of Care indicating their support for the conversion. Also, you will continue to report to the COC Homeless Management Information System and annual housing inventory count. And lastly, if you're going to include any preferences for a subpopulation, you will have to have your admin plan if you're doing PBV, or tenant selection plan if you're doing PBRA, reviewed by the FHEO local office and the local OGC office to make sure that the admin plan or tenant selection plan complies with the requirements of Section 2.7E of the notice. So again, if you're going to provide services for a subpopulation or provide additional preferences at the project, you need to make sure that your admin or tenant selection plans are in compliance with Section 2.7E of the notice. And I will recommend this may, in some instances, be a very heavy lift, meaning that it may take a little time or a lot of time to have FHEO and OGC the plan for compliance. So I would suggest that you do this in the very beginning of the process. So after all of that, after uploading a completed conversion plan to the RAD resource desk, you are almost there for HUD approval. So once we get the completed conversion plan uploaded to the RAD resource desk, the transaction manager will reach out to you to do what is called a concept call to discuss any deficiencies. And once all of those deficiencies are met and the conversion plan is 100% complete, it will take the transaction manager, the assigned transaction manager, about 60 days to review and issue a HUD approval. Again, the HUD approval will come in the form of a letter that is, or that lists the terms and conditions of the approval. If you're doing a PBV conversion, the local HUD PIH office will get what's called a PIH director's memo, and in that memo, it will inform the local PIH office that your property project has been approved for conversion to a PBV contract, and that the PHA needs to be contacted, and the administrative functions such as funding and all of that needs to start, that work needs to start or get started on. If you're doing a PBRA, at that time, the account executive will start working with you to get funding in place, to get the vouchers in place, will request that you submit, I guess, information for your bank account or your bank to receive payments, do the 2530s and so forth to set up the PBRA contract. So all of the administrative functions, such as terminating the Mod Rehab contract, getting the vouchers in place, you'll be, again, given 90 days to complete all of these functions, working with the PHA if you're doing PBV, working with the account executive if you're doing PBRA, and if you run into issues and you're not able to execute or do everything that's needed to be done to execute within 90 days, you can request an extension to extend it beyond the 90 days. Send that request to your transaction manager. And so once you've done everything, you will execute your new PBV or PBRA contract, and you'll have a contract in place for 20 years that will be renewable at the end of the term for additional 20 years, dependent on if appropriations are available. So if you do a PBV conversion, what's the role of the PHA? Again, the PHA in the beginning of the process, one of the documents that I may have not had mentioned is that you need to be in good standing with the PHA. So you're going to get a letter from the PHA saying that you're in good standing and upload it to the RAD resource desk. During the conversion process, you're going to coordinate with HUD, the PIH local office, HUD's Office of Recapitalization via the transaction manager that's assigned to you to gather the conversion, to bring together the conversion plan and have it reviewed and get it approved. Then also the PHA is going to determine the initial PBV contract rent via a rent reasonableness analysis. And before execution of the PBV contract, they're going to do HQS inspections to make sure that the units are in good order. And then also they will continue administering the contract as they were doing when you had the Mod Rehab contract in place. However, if you go the PBRA route, if you decide to get a project-based rental assistance contract, you will be assigned an account executive, and your PBRA contract will be administered by HUD. The account executive will work with you to set up the Section 8 contract and will request documentation to set up vouchering, and also will work with you to get the APS 2530 clearance. In addition, funds will be set aside, so once the contract is executed, you'll start receiving the funds, and at the 1-year anniversary, they will complete the annual or determine the annual increase via OCAS, and will continue the ongoing monitoring and compliance of the contract. However, you may have to hire a management agent to complete the functions or execute the functions that were initially done by the PHA. Those will be completed by your management team. So with all of that, I've done an overview, a broad overview of the process of doing a streamline conversion. Again, if there are any questions, we're going to have a question and answer session soon, but the Section 2A of the notice is a very resourceful document that you should reference to get additional details or to refresh your memory on any of the documents that I briefly discussed during this presentation. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to John to give you an overview of one of our former applicants, the Westwood Ambassador.
Thanks a lot, Marlene. Appreciate that. So Westwood Ambassador, this is actually our first streamline conversion. And it came in, there's actually 42 total units. It was originally built in 1960. It was purchased in 1994 by the current owner, Charities Housing. And of the 42 units, only 10 units were on the Mod Rehab contract, subsidized by the contract. So they had planned, thinking through longer term, it'd be really just terrific to put in place a 20-year project-based voucher contract. And so they opted in for the streamlined conversion process, not needing capital needs assessment. They were able to provide, PHA, who is Santa Clara Housing Authority. This is actually their first RAD for multifamily conversion. And, they were in good standing. They had passing HQS inspections. So there was, we didn't require a capital needs assessment or a scope of work, a development budget, or financing. It was pretty straightforward, right? We wanted a narrative of what their plan was and a bunch of the different certifications required by the RAD program. And as well as, the PHA had to set the initial rents and provide some other additional certifications of compliance. Other than that, really the heaviest lift was putting together a 20-year operating pro forma. And that's what we were talking about before. That paints the picture of all the units of the property, not just our RAD units, but painting, we wanted to see how the total health of the 42 units are, not just the 10 RAD units. But so they put that together for us, and the review processing time was less than 60 days. I'd say there was a little bit of back and forth on the pro forma, maybe some of the other documents, and really just some technical questions, because this was the housing authority's first time going through RAD, the local PIH field staff first time going through RAD, and the owner's first time going through RAD. So, working through some of those questions took a little bit more time, but I think once you go through it once, it becomes pretty clear on how straightforward this really can be with a streamlined process. Santa Clara has now gone through their portfolio, and we're working with another Mod Rehab owner. This Mod Rehab owner has 4 units of a larger property. I mean, it may have 50 total units, but only 4 of those are under a Mod Rehab contract. And Santa Clara and our PIH field office colleagues, really know the program now, and that should take, less than 30 days from submission, if not sooner, to work through the conversion plan to get to an approval. So you can really see, as there's less of a financial analysis and underwriting involved in the RAD conversion, this really becomes more programmatic, except for the pro forma, right? And really allows for a pathway towards long-term preservation. And so Westwood's been our first one. We now have a number of other ones in the queue nationwide working on their conversion plans or setting up concept calls, just submitting their interest. So which is great to see, and that's really the point of the webinar today, is to educate everybody and let them know there really is a clear path to RAD for these smaller Mod Rehab SRO contract units, 20 and under. So I'm going to start off with the poll question. How likely now are you to sign up for a RAD conversion? A, not likely. B, definitely, I'm sold. C, I need a little more information to make a decision. Don't worry, we're going to give you our contact information after you're done here. And D, not at all. I'm only intended to gather information. That's okay too. Like I said, at the end of this webinar, we'll give you some good contact information. And really the moral of this webinar is you're not here alone. You have partners in RECAP, your PIH field office, as well as your public housing authority. So please do go ahead and make your selections now. I expect 100% definitely. Mm-hmm. We probably have about 5 or 7 more seconds.
And the poll is closing soon. Make sure you hit that submit button once you've selected your result. So that way your answer is recorded.
So some people are not likely. Okay, we'll get to you. Don't worry. We'll try to educate you a little more on why RAD may be a great benefit for you. We have a lot of definitely's, need some more information, and others. A whole lot of people didn't answer. So, but it's a pretty good sprinkling of definitely, and just maybe need just a little more information to make my decision. So thanks for that. Next poll question: how'd you hear about this webinar? And you can select all that apply. We're always very curious. Where you heard about it and why you signed up. So was it A, the HUD Exchange, B, the SNAPS listserv, or C, the Office of Recapitalization? If you wouldn't mind going ahead and answering the poll question, please. Again, please select all that apply.
poll will be closing soon, and we should have the results up shortly.
And via the HUD Exchange was the most. That's terrific. So it's good. That means our posting worked, and we're happy to hear that. So we'd like to take this time, and Tony, I think there may be some additional questions. We'd love to answer those.
Yes, there are.
Great.
There's some really good questions. So one is, what is the difference between a rent comparability study and a rent reasonableness analysis?
That's a terrific question. So rent comparability study is synonymous with Section 8 multifamily housing. There's a Section 8 renewal guide. Chapter 9 is all about rent comparability studies. And what is it? It's essentially a market study. It takes housing of comparable value in the market, non-subsidized, and you hire an appraiser or a vendor who does these rent comparability studies, and it gives you market analysis and provides you with a rent that you're going to be able to achieve in the market. Your Section 8 rent would be able to achieve in the market. Rent reasonableness, we can cover this a couple times. That's completed by a public housing authority. It's part of their rent setting for a project-based voucher program, and it's really very similar. I mean, it's like the sibling to a rent comparability study for multifamily. Well, for PHAs, public housing authorities, rent reasonableness is that market study. Essentially, looks at the comparables in the market and means what reasonable rent could be achieved in this market.
Great, John. The next question is the HQS inspection required for all units on the contract or all units at the property as a whole?
Another terrific question. So as far as RAD is concerned, you're more than likely only going to be subject to housing quality standards inspection as a Mod Rehab or Mod Rehab SRO owner for just those contract units. And certainly when you convert to project-based voucher, if that's your choice, you would then just be subject to housing quality standards inspections prior to execution for, again, your contract units, your units converting to RAD.
Thank you. The next question has to do with annual deposits to the Reserve for Replacement account. Do they have to be at least $450 per unit per year?
Great question. So in a streamlined conversion process, they don't. But that is another way to be exempt from a capital needs assessment with financing in the RAD notice. But as far as the streamlined conversion, we do want to see you're making a deposit into your Reserve for Replacement account, but there is not a threshold amount to be made.
Excellent. Next question is, are there any plans in the works to allow conversion of the Shelter Plus Care Continuum of Care funded units through RAD?
That's a terrific question. Yeah, it's something we'll obviously continue to talk about, but in the not too distant future, no, it's not on the agenda. But I can't say maybe a couple years down the line, maybe that's something hopefully we can think about and see it through.
Okay, so somebody asked, where does the funding for the vouchers or the PBV come from? TPVs or set-asides?
Good question. So funding for project-based vouchers comes out of the Tenant Protection Voucher account. And every housing authority has a TPV account, or a Housing Choice Voucher program that administers project-based vouchers. And so the TPV account funds all Housing Choice Vouchers, which are then project-based via project-based voucher.
Excellent. Okay. So the next question is, after the PBV rent increase process, are rent increases the same as other PBV rent increases? 110% of FMR or rent reasonableness or payment standard or lower?
Yes, it should be the same. That's a PBV, and I think Marlene cited that PBV reg back in the presentation. 24 CFR 983-305 maybe. It is. It's the lesser of test. Lesser of your rent reasonableness, up to 110% of fair market rents, less any utility allowance, or the owner requested rents. And that'll be every year on an annual renewal. The owner would make that request for that rent determination.
Excellent. Thanks, John. The next question is, I read that SROs can set the rent at 0 FMR, not 75% of FMR. Is that correct?
So, and I think what the question is, if I'm an SRO owner, can I compare my rent standard to a 0-bedroom unit? And the answer is yes. You would be compared to the efficiency fair market rent standard, as opposed to, it used to be, that's an old notice revision, it used to be 75% of, now it's strictly the efficiency FMR.
Great. The next question is, where can I get a copy of the 42-page document utilized by the panelists today?
I'm sure after we're done, we're going to be posting this on both the RAD resource desk as well as the HUD Exchange.
Great. The next question is, can we request rents to be set at small area fair market rents? So
you can do that for project-based rental assistance, simply a request that you make. For project-based vouchers, I believe there is a way to opt into a small area FMR, but that has to be one described in the Public Housing Authority's administrative plan. And so that's something, if you're considering project-based vouchers, to talk about with your Public Housing Authority.
Great. Okay. The next question has to do with rent loss and vacancy loss. Does an owner still receive rent loss, vacancy loss, and damage reimbursement?
I'm wondering if this has to do with special claims. And
I believe so.
Yeah, and I believe if you're going project-based rental assistance, I believe the answer is yes. You're under the Section 8 program, and so you're subject to the HUD Handbook 4350.3 and all those rules and regulations. Special claims are a part of that project-based rental assistance world. I'm not so certain how that works on the project-based voucher side. That's something to talk about with your Public Housing Authority if that does carry over.
Okay, the next question is there a cost to owners for the Part 58 environmental review?
Yeah, I believe there is. Just like with the Part 50 environmental review, you still need some kind of environmental record or report. You're going to need to work with a vendor to prepare that report. Usually it's in the standard of what we call a transaction screen. Sometimes we'll see it a little bit larger of a report we call a Phase 1 ESA. Usually those are the reports, whether it's Part 50 or Part 58. Those are the baseline reports that you need. A transaction screen would be a lesser cost to you. And the responsible entity, if you're working on a Part 58, the PHA will help you with that relationship with this responsible entity, and that responsible entity will let you know exactly what they need. For the Part 50, we would need a transaction screen or a Phase 1 ESA. I believe that carries over to both programs, but something to confirm with your PHA and responsible entity.
Okay, great. The next question is, if converting from a Section 8 Mod Rehab SRO to project-based vouchers, would participants still be required to be homeless at entry to be eligible for the project?
So this is a great question. I think it's very specific to Mod Rehab SROs, right? And so one of the program designations we carry through SRO through a RAD conversion, whether you're going project-based voucher or project-based rental assistance, is we carry over that homeless designation. It's memorialized in the HAP contract. So yes, the homeless designation does carry over. And you'll continue to work with your COC as well.
That's really helpful. So the last question, well, there are a couple of questions, and another one is, where will this information be posted, and where can I find the slideshow on the website? And I can answer part of that question, which is that the slides will be posted on the HUD Exchange where you signed up for training, so it will be on the training page of the HUD Exchange. And I'm assuming it will also be posted on the HUD.gov website. Right, John?
That's right. That's right, Tony, as well as the RAD resource desk.
Excellent. Well, that's the last question that we have right now.
Terrific. Anybody else with any other questions? Otherwise, I do just want to briefly share with you some information that we think, some tools that are going to be very useful to you when you're thinking about RAD. So Merlene really covered very well how to establish a relationship with us, the RAD resource desk. We have the link embedded here in the slideshow when you can pull it down. You want to, create an account and submit an initial submission of interest. You have a personal conversation with the transaction manager. Not just the transaction manager, we'll pull in the Public Housing Authority, the Public and Indian Housing Field Office, and if you're interested in project-based rental assistance, even HUD multifamily. We'll have all the stakeholders on that call. You'll see the buy-in from HUD at all levels, as well as with our PHA partners. We'll talk you through, the whole program, the overview, what you need, how do you get there. We also offer direct technical assistance for owners. There's free consultation up to 16 hours. That really can help you educate you on the program, the requirements, what HUD's looking for in these submission packages. They're not going to package a RAD conversion plan for you. They can certainly talk you through how to get there. Another very useful notice, the RAD program notice, it's revision 4. And section 2 is really what you want to pay attention to. And that's all about the Mod Rehab and Mod Rehab SRO program. Merlene also alluded to earlier in this webinar presentation, the Mod Rehab Processing Guide, and that's on the HUD Exchange, and we think that's a really nicely laid out guide. It really simplifies some of the requirements in the RAD notice and really walks you through what document we're really looking for to meet each requirement. I think it'd be very helpful for you all. There's also various fact sheets for various audiences on the Mod Rehab HUD Exchange website. We also have a recapitalization workbook, an Excel tool to think through, maybe after you convert the RAD, after the streamlined process. Okay, now how do I get together the development team? I have this 20-year contract. So that could be a useful tool for after RAD conversion. These we think are just really could be useful tools for you, ways to contact us. And then also we're going to leave you with, hey, if you do have a question, hey, reach out to us. We have a general inbox, rad2@hud.gov. Right, and that's monitored daily. You can reach out to Merlene or I directly, and we can also talk with you and answer any questions that you may have. I don't know if there are any more questions, Tony. If not, I'll just, have a couple closing remarks.
No more questions, just a thank you to John, Merlene, and Shalonda for the training. It really helps folks understand more about the Mod Rehab conversion program. That's it.
Great. And then just in closing, really want to appreciate, thanks to Merlene for her presentation, as well as everybody who attended today. And hopefully we can leave you knowing that, you're really not alone. You have a partner in preservation here with RECAP, with your Public Housing Authority, with your Public and Indian Housing Field Office partners, and if contemplating PBRA, with your HUD multifamily field office partners. We're all helping to get you where you need to go, and that's preservation. And RAD is really a tool to get there. It can really help you with a long-term 20-year HAP contract that can stabilize your property, both financially and maybe with an ability to leverage some financing and physically down the road. And you can really be successful with this streamlined processing. We really hopefully evaluated this process to ensure it's not as heavy of a lift, it's not as complicated for those owners, while not increasing the risk to HUD. So it really is a win-win for the program. So we hope you really consider RAD and talk to us about it. Thank you, Tony, and everyone.